The bank looked like it belonged to another. Marble floors, high ceilings threaded with gold trim, lamps shaped like flowers of frosted glass. People moved with the easy confidence of those who never wondered if their cards would be declined. Their shoes didn't squeak. Their clothes didn't wrinkle. No one clutched anything the way I was clutching that old. I stood in line, feeling like a stain on the polished floor. My jeans were worn thin at the knees. The hem of my shirt wouldn't sit straight, no matter how many times I smoothed it down. I could feel the rough edge of my motel key in my pocket, pressing into my thigh like a reminder. Wow, I turned the card over in my fingers again. The numbers were so faded they almost looked like ghost bones under the plastic. The magnetic strip on the back had a scratch running straight through it, like someone had taken a key to it in anger. It was old. Older than my marriage, older than half my regrets. That's what my father had written on the envelope I found it in. His handwriting had always slanted a little to the right, like it was in a hurry to say something. The world wasn't just hard now. It felt like it was made of stone, and I'd been dropped on it from a great height. Next, please. The line had moved without me noticing. The man in front of me, with his flawless suit and expensive watch, stepped away from the counter. For a second, I thought about stepping away too, turning around, walking straight back out through the heavy brass doors, and pretending this had been a stupid idea I'd never actually followed through on. But my stomach cramped. A tight, empty twist that reminded me I'd had nothing but crackers and peanut butter for 2 days. The last cash in my wallet had paid for another grimy night in the motel, and the change in my purse wouldn't buy much more than a coffee. If this card had $10 on it, that was one more day I didn't have to worry about. I forced myself forward. The name tag on the teller's chest read Harold Banks. It suited him somehow. He had the look of a man who had been born inside a bank and never quite managed to leave. A little grey around the temples, glasses low on his nose, tie slightly crooked like he'd fixed it in a hurry 20 years ago and never bothered again. "Good morning," he said, with the automatic politeness of someone who'd said it 1,000 times already that day. "How can I help you?" I'm sorry to bother you with this." I started immediately, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. I held the card out like a confession. "It's really old. My father gave it to me a long time ago. I just wanted to check if there's anything on it. Maybe a few dollars." He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "No bother at all, ma'am. That's what we're here for. Let's take a look. Ma'am." Not sweetheart or honey, or any of the condescending things Richard used to throw at me when he was in the mood to remind me how dependent I was. Just ma'am. Neutral. Respectful. I let go of the card, fingers reluctant, as if it might vanish between us if I wasn't careful. Mr. Banks took it, turned it over once, twice, eyebrows lifting slightly at the scratch across the strip. "This is a vintage one," he remarked lightly. "Haven't seen this design in a while." "It's probably dead." I tried to laugh and failed. "Honestly, it's fine if it is. I just thought I'd check." He nodded and slid it through the reader. It made a faint, tired sound, like even the machine knew this was a long shot. He typed a few keys, eyes flicking to the monitor. I expected the disappointment. I was used to it by now. I expected him to sigh and tell me the card had expired 10 years ago. I expected him to say the account had been closed, or that there was a balance of $8 and some change, and I would smile and say, "Thank you, that's okay. I appreciate you checking," while trying not to think about how few packets of crackers $8 could buy. Instead, I watched the blood drain from his face. His expression didn't just change, it collapsed. His jaw loosened, his shoulders tensed, and his eyes widened behind his glasses, as if he were watching a car crash happen in slow motion on the screen in front of him. He checked something on the monitor, typed, checked again. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, at my tired face, my cheap clothes, my white-knuckled hands gripping the edge of the counter. "Ma'am," he said, and this time his voice sounded different, thinner. I'm going to need you to step behind the counter for a moment. I blinked. I'm sorry? Please. He cleared his throat, trying to steady it and failing. Could you come with me? Just for a moment. Behind the counter. Every instinct I had screamed no. Customers didn't go behind the counter. That was the invisible line. On one side, normal people with normal transactions. On the other side, cameras, security, rules, the place you only ever saw if you'd done something wrong. Or if something was very, very wrong with you. I don't understand, I said. My heart had started to pound so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Is there a problem? Did I do something? Please, he repeated more urgently now. I promise I'll explain. We can't do this out here. He lifted the small section of the partition that separated the customers from the staff. That hinged piece of counter had always looked abstract to me, like something you only saw from a distance. Up close, it looked heavier, final. I became aware of the silence around us. Conversations had dimmed. A woman bounced a baby on her hip while staring openly at me. An older couple whispered to each other. Somewhere behind me, someone said, "What's going on?" I felt my face heat. Shame burned through my chest. What did I do? I stepped through the opening on unsteady legs. The bank suddenly felt colder on this side, the air-conditioned chill cutting through my thin shirt. Mr. Banks gestured for me to follow him through a door marked private. As we walked, I caught sight of 2 security guards detaching themselves from the walls and falling into step behind us. My mouth went dry. I swear, I whispered, mostly to myself. I haven't done anything. I didn't even know if the card worked. No one answered. The hallway was narrow and quiet, carpet muffling our footsteps. My mind raced in jagged circles. Had my father gotten this card in some illegal way? Was the account tied to something criminal? Was I holding evidence I didn't understand? Or worse, had Richard somehow set me up? 3 months ago, he'd walked me out of our home. My home, with 1 suitcase and a blunt statement about everything being in his name. Maybe this was the encore. Maybe he'd put something in my things. Maybe he wanted to see me hauled out of a bank in handcuffs. He liked control. He liked power. He liked scenes. My palms were sweating by the time we reached the small office. Mr. Banks gestured toward a chair, and I sank into it because my legs didn't feel like they were entirely mine anymore. The security guards stayed near the door, close enough that I couldn't forget they were there. On the desk, a computer monitor still glowed with numbers I couldn't see from this angle. Mr. Banks sat down, adjusted his glasses with a hand that shook just slightly, and took a breath. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "before we go any further, I need to verify your identity." "Oh, okay." My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like someone else's, speaking through a bad connection. "May I see your driver's license?" It took me 2 tries to open my wallet. My fingers didn't want to cooperate. They kept snagging on the worn edges of receipts and loyalty cards from places I no longer had the money to visit. I finally managed to pull out my license and pass it across the desk. He studied it in silence. Then he began to ask questions. My full name, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name, my father's full name, the address where I'd grown up. I answered them all, heart hammering. Every one of his questions felt like a test I might unexpectedly fail, like he might suddenly look up and say, "Gotcha, you're lying. This isn't yours." But he didn't. He just nodded slowly, each confirmation deepening whatever emotion was in his eyes. Something complicated and heavy, something that looked like a mix of disbelief and pity. He handed the license back. "Mrs. Morton," he said quietly, "what I'm about to show you is going to be a lot to take in. I'm going to ask you to stay as calm as you can. I promise you, you're not in trouble." My fingers tightened around the plastic card until the edges dug into my skin. "You're scaring me," I whispered. He hesitated. Then he turned the monitor so I could see it. There were numbers, columns of them, lines of text, account notations. My eyes slid over all of it, finally catching on the one number at the bottom, the one that mattered. I stared. I counted digits, once, twice, a third time. My brain refused to accept what I was seeing. It was impossible. It was insane. It was the moment my old life, with its cheap motel and $43 in my wallet, quietly shattered into something else. But before you understand what that number did to me, before you understand why a middle-aged banker looked at me like I was holding a live bomb, you need to know how I got here at all. You need to know about the house I lost, the marriage that collapsed, and the night I found my father's envelope at the bottom of a worn-out suitcase. Because 3 days before that number appeared on a screen, I was standing on a sidewalk in front of a door that used to be mine, holding everything I owned in one hand. The suitcase looked smaller when it was sitting on the sidewalk. Pathetic, almost. Funny how 12 years of marriage could fit into something I could lift with one hand. A scuffed, faded red suitcase with a loose zipper and a dent on one side. Once upon a time, I'd packed it for vacations with Richard, trips where I'd iron his shirts and fold everything just the way he liked. Now, it held the scraps of a life he'd swept off the table like crumbs he was done looking at. Behind the screen door, I could see the outline of my house. His house now, legally. The white shutters I'd painted 3 summers ago. The jasmine plant I'd nursed back from a wilted twig. The curtains I'd sewn myself. It still smelled like us in there, or at least it smelled like the version of us I thought existed. Clean laundry. Coffee brewing at 6 a.m. Citrus candles. All the useless domestic comfort I'd wrapped myself in, thinking it meant something. The door opened. Richard filled the frame the same way he always did, with that practiced, confident presence, as if the house bowed to him. His arms were crossed, chest puffed just enough to signal authority. His expression was carved out of cold stone. "Clara," he said, as if saying my name were an inconvenience. "You need to leave. Now." Just like that. No hesitation, no falter in his voice, as if I were the cable repairman whose shift had ended. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Richard, we just finished mediation yesterday. The papers aren't even... They're signed," he cut in sharply. "You signed them. Everything is finalized. The house is legally mine. The accounts are mine. The cars are mine. You understood all of this." Yes, I had understood. I had understood that the lawyer he insisted I use, because it would make the process smoother, had never really represented me. I had understood too late that being exhausted, gaslit, guilted, and financially starved was the perfect recipe for forcing me into a corner with only one door out. His door. I had understood that the man I married never wanted a partner. He wanted a dependent, a shadow, someone easy to erase. But the part I couldn't understand, couldn't accept, was how easily he was doing this. "Richard," I said softly, "we were married for 12 years. I gave up my career when your business started picking up. I supported you. I believed in you. You can't just throw me out like... And I gave you 12 years of a comfortable life," he snapped. "We're even. Even as if marriage had been a transaction I'd failed to pay into properly." My vision blurred for a moment, not with tears, but with a dizzy wave of disbelief. I gripped the handle of the suitcase harder. Movement flickered behind him. Leslie, from the moment I met her at Richard's office, perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect handshake, I knew she admired him in that way. Ambitious women sometimes admire ambitious men. Hungrily. She stepped beside him now, sliding one manicured hand around his waist like she'd been practicing for this moment. Her perfume drifted through the doorway, floral and expensive. "Clara," she said with fake gentleness, "it's really for the best. You'll see. Sometimes people just grow apart." I wanted to ask her if growing apart meant growing into Richard's bed while I was still in the picture, but I didn't have the strength for theatrics. My body felt hollow, like my bones were made of wet paper. Richard's eyes hardened. Go. I didn't cry, I didn't argue, I didn't beg. Something had been dying inside me for years, quietly, slowly, like a plant starving for sunlight. This was just the moment I finally realized it had already turned to dust. I picked up my suitcase. 12 years, it didn't weigh much at all. The walk away from the house felt surreal, dreamlike. My footsteps sounded too loud on the pavement. The air tasted wrong. The world didn't look like the one I'd lived in yesterday. Cars drove past, people walked dogs, someone watered their lawn. Everything normal, everything functioning, everything fine, except me. By the time I reached the bus stop, the sun had begun to set, streaking the sky orange and pink, like some cruel painter mocking the way my life had just collapsed. I had 40 throws in my purse, and no home. The motel I found was the kind of place people pass without seeing. A neon sign that flickered, doors with peeling paint, carpet that felt damp no matter how long the heater ran. You paid by the week, in cash, no questions asked. The clerk barely glanced at me before sliding a key across the counter. Room 12C. The number felt like the punchline of a joke I wasn't in on. Inside, the room smelled of old cigarettes and loneliness. The bedspread was a faded brown pattern that hid stains with exhausting success. The air conditioner rattled like it was coughing. In the bathroom, the faucet dripped with a tired, irregular rhythm. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for what felt like hours. My phone buzzed twice. Richard, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Leslie, I'm sorry things had to end this way. I turned the phone off. The silence of the room thickened. It felt like a place where dreams came to die. That first night, I slept under my jacket because I didn't trust the sheets. I woke up shivering at 3 a.m. to the sound of a couple screaming in the room next door. The second night, I couldn't sleep at all. My thoughts kept circling like vultures. How will you survive? What will you eat? Where will you go? Who can you call? The last question hurt the most. My sister Judith and I hadn't spoken in 8 years, not since she'd called our father a failure, and I told her never to contact me again. We'd both meant it. And now, our silence felt deeper than blood. Around 4 a.m., unable to lie still anymore, I pulled my suitcase onto the bed and started rummaging through it. Maybe I'd missed something valuable. Jewelry Richard hadn't taken, a watch, anything. Some scrap of my old life that could be traded for enough cash to breathe for another day. My fingers brushed something stiff near the bottom lining. An envelope. Yellowed with age, edges soft. The handwriting across the front so familiar it punched me straight in the chest. From my Clara, when the world gets hard, love, Dad. The motel room disappeared. The stained carpet disappeared. For a moment, even the ache in my chest disappeared. All that remained was the memory of my father's warm, calloused hands, and the steady kindness in his eyes. Hands that had fixed other people's broken things. Hands that had never stopped working. Hands that had given me this envelope before I was old enough to understand that the world could, in fact, get unbearably hard. I opened it. A bank card slid into my palm. Ancient. Faded. The same card I would clutch 3 days later in the grand marble lobby of Westfield National Bank. The card that had changed everything. But in that motel room, all I thought was, maybe there's $50 on it. Maybe enough for a few days of food. Maybe enough time to think. I went to the bank the next morning, and nothing, absolutely nothing about my life was ever the same again. The morning I walked to Westfield National Bank, the sky was the washed-out color of old paper, grey, thin, undecided, the kind of morning that didn't promise anything except that it would exist, with or without me. My stomach felt hollow but tight at the same time, a knot pulled so hard it had begun to fray at the edges. The bank stood at the corner like a monument someone had forgotten to worship. Tall marble columns, polished brass doors, wide steps that seemed to elevate the building above the ordinary world. I hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, feeling like I needed permission to climb them. People in crisp coats and expensive handbags brushed past me, barely glancing at the woman clutching a faded card like a lifeline. I almost turned around. I almost let pride or shame or fear pull me back to the dingy motel room where the air conditioner rattled like it was dying. I almost convinced myself that the card would be worthless, that walking inside would only bring disappointment. But my hunger gnawed again, sharp and insistent. Pride didn't feed you. Shame didn't pay for another night of shelter. Fear didn't magically create options where none existed. So I forced myself up the steps. The brass handles were cold against my palm as I pushed the door open. The scent inside, paper, ink, and something faintly metallic, hit me like a memory from a past I never lived, a place for people with accounts, investments, wealth, a place for people who weren't me. The lobby bustled with quiet, purposeful movement. A man in a tailored suit talked into a Bluetooth earpiece near the window, gesturing sharply. A woman in a pencil skirt tapped on her iPad as she stood in line. A mother with 2 children tucked neatly against her side filled out a deposit slip with rapid, confident handwriting. I got in line behind a man wearing a watch so bright it reflected little flecks of light onto the marble floor. The woman behind me carried a designer purse with a gold chain strap that probably cost more than my entire suitcase had ever held. I clutched my father's card so tightly the edge dug into my finger. I don't belong here. But belonging wasn't required for survival. When it was my turn, I stepped forward before my courage could dissolve. And now we were back to the moment Mr. Banks called me behind the counter. Everything moved strangely after that, like the air thickened around me, slowing each step. I followed him through the private door, the security guards trailing like silent shadows. My pulse thudded in my throat, heavy and rhythmic. My mouth was dry enough to crack. The hallway felt colder, more serious. The carpeted floor muted all sound except the frantic beat of my heart. In the small office, Mr. Banks took his seat and began to verify my identity, his voice calm but tight with something unspoken. I answered every question automatically. Name, birth date, father's name, words coming out like I was being interviewed underwater. When he finally turned the monitor toward me, I expected confusion. I didn't expect my entire world to tilt. The number on the screen didn't compute. My mind tried to break it apart, analyze it, shrink it into something rational. But no amount of blinking changed the way those digits lined up in a row so long, it looked like a phone number. 47 million. It wasn't money, it was impossibility. I backed away slightly in my chair, as if distance could make the number revert to something I understood. My throat tightened. My breaths came shorter. No, I whispered. That's not real. It can't be real. You made a mistake. Please check again. I did, Mr. Banks said softly. 3 times, and I had my supervisor check as well. No, I repeated, shaking my head. My father this isn't... Mrs. Morton, he interrupted gently. I need you to stay calm. I promise you're safe. But there is something important you need to know. My hands shook uncontrollably now. I tucked them under my thighs to hide it. What important thing? He folded his own hands in front of him, steady and deliberate, the way someone might prepare to explain a tragedy or deliver a life-altering diagnosis. This account, he began slowly, was opened 25 years ago. Your father set it up under a specific kind of trust. His name is listed as the original grantor. Your name appears as beneficiary from the moment you turned 18. I stared at him, my mind snagged on each word like fabric catching on thorns. But my father, he didn't have money, I said again, the disbelief turning sharp in my voice. We struggled. I watched him patch his boots with duct tape. He reused nails. We ate pasta 4 nights a week. He fixed broken heaters for tenants who couldn't afford to call a real repairman. He never owned anything. He worked until the day he... My voice cracked. Mr. Banks sighed softly, not out of impatience, but empathy. Your father may not have appeared wealthy, but according to these documents, he made a decision, one that turned out to be extraordinary, almost unheard of. He clicked the mouse and brought up a scanned contract. Old, slightly yellowed, like it had lived in a filing cabinet untouched for decades. Your father inherited land, he explained. A small plot in an area that at the time no one thought had much value. When a developer approached him wanting to acquire it, he didn't accept a simple one-time payment. He pointed to a clause in the contract. He asked for 5% of all future profits derived from anything built on that land. Forever. The word hung in the air. Forever? But that's... I swallowed hard. That's something only wealthy people negotiate. Or lawyers. My father didn't even trust online banking. He used envelopes to budget. And yet, Mr. Banks said, he negotiated this, and the developer agreed, assuming the profits would be minimal. What did they build? I asked, barely breathing. He clicked again. The image of a massive downtown complex filled the screen. Sleek towers, luxury apartments, high-end shops, restaurants. A place I'd walked past dozens of times, but never imagined had anything to do with me. The Hartwell district, he said. It generates substantial profits every year, and 5% of that has been deposited into the trust untouched for 20 years. My heart stumbled inside my chest. That's why the balance is what it is today. I stared at the screen, feeling like I was looking at someone else's life. Someone else's miracle. My father, the man who refused to buy himself new shoes, had quietly secured a future he never told me about. A future he'd hidden, not because he didn't trust me, but because he wanted to protect me. Why didn't he ever use it? I whispered. I can't answer that. Mr. Banks shook his head gently. But I can tell you something else. He hesitated, and the air tightened again. There was a security flag placed on this account 3 months ago. I froze. What kind of flag? Someone attempted to access the account using your name and social security number. The room swayed. A buzzing started in my ears. Someone pretending to be me? I asked slowly. Yes. Who? We couldn't identify them, he said carefully. But the timing was notable. He didn't have to finish the sentence. 3 months ago, right before Richard filed for divorce. Right when he'd hired that mysterious private investigator. Right when he'd started looking at me like a liability instead of a wife. Right when everything in my life began to unravel. My voice came out a whisper of dread. He knew. Mr. Banks said nothing, but his silence was an answer. My father's secret, my inheritance, the trust, the $47 million. It hadn't just been waiting for me. It had been hunted. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The tiny office felt too small, the air too thin, the walls too close, like they were quietly leaning in to listen. The hum of the computer, the drip of the air vent, even the distant echo of footsteps in the bank hallway. All of it faded beneath the one truth ringing in my skull. Richard had been searching for this money before he abandoned me. He hadn't just fallen out of love. He hadn't simply moved on. He hadn't grown tired, or distant, or disappointed. He had been hunting me. Mr. Banks folded his hands carefully, as though handling a dangerous truth. Mrs. Morton, he said softly, this account is part of an irrevocable inheritance trust. Its privacy protections are exceptionally strict. That is why the impersonation attempt failed. My voice scraped its way out of my throat. Impersonation. Yes, he nodded. Whoever attempted access used your social security number, your date of birth, and a forged signature. My stomach twisted as if a fist had closed around it. That means someone had all of my personal information. He didn't argue. He didn't have to. I felt it, the cold certainty settling into my bones like winter. Richard, of course it was Richard. The PI he hired, the credit card charge he brushed off, the sudden hostility, the rushed divorce, the way he stripped everything from me and left me gasping in a motel room. He hadn't divorced me because the marriage had fallen apart. He divorced me because he thought I was sitting on a fortune he couldn't reach. The betrayal hit so deep I felt the echo in my ribs. Mr. Banks seemed to weigh whether to say the next thing. Then he reached slowly for a folder beside the computer. "There is more context," he said. "I believe it is important you understand how this account came to exist." He opened the folder and slid a stack of printouts toward me. Scanned documents, contracts, handwritten notes that had aged into soft yellows. "This is the original land agreement your father entered into 25 years ago," he explained. "It outlines the sale and the profit-sharing clause." I scanned the paper, the legalities blurring together, but the essential truth glowed through the text like a hidden fire. My father hadn't stumbled into wealth. He'd made a decision, a strategic one, a brilliant one. But why? Why had he hidden it? Why had he let us live the way we did? Counting coins, patching boots, taking the bus, even in the rain. "Are you absolutely sure this is his signature?" I whispered. Mr. Banks nodded. "We verified it with archival records. This is unquestionably his agreement." I pressed my hand against my mouth. My father. The man who apologized for spending money on new socks. The man who repaired neighbors' broken appliances without charging them. The man who worked late nights for overtime because he wanted to buy me a birthday cake. That man had negotiated a multi-million-dollar legacy and never touched a cent. Something hot prickled behind my eyes. "He lived poor," I choked. He chose that." "Yes," Mr. Banks said softly. "And he chose this trust structure too." He clicked to a different screen. "This," he continued, "is why your ex-husband has no legal claim to the funds, even retroactively. The trust is structured in a way that isolates the inheritance from marital property. It cannot be contested under standard divorce law. It should have made me feel relieved. It didn't. It made me feel sick, because Richard hadn't known that. He hadn't known he couldn't reach it. He had only suspected the money existed, and he'd torn apart our marriage, my life, trying to get to it. The numbness creeping up my spine wasn't shock anymore. It was something sharper, meaner. A shard of anger I didn't know I still had the strength to feel. Mr. Banks hesitated before speaking again. "Mrs. Morton, there is something else. Something I believe you need to be prepared for." My pulse quickened. "What?" He turned the monitor back toward himself and pulled up a security log, rows of timestamps and red flags. "The impersonation attempt wasn't random," he explained. "It came from a registered law firm's IP address." My breath froze. "A law firm?" He nodded, one specializing in asset discovery during divorce proceedings. I felt my entire body recoil. "So he did know something," I whispered. "He must have." "He suspected," Mr. Banks corrected gently. "He likely hoped to confirm it before negotiations began, when he couldn't access the funds." He paused, delicately. "He may have accelerated the divorce for other reasons. Other reasons, like cutting me off from all shared resources, like leaving me penniless, like ensuring I had nowhere to go and no capacity to fight back. He wanted me desperate. He wanted me broken. He wanted me to crawl back. And then, only then, would he swoop in as the savior he always pretended to be, just long enough to take what he believed he deserved." A pulse of heat surged through my veins, shame, fury, grief, all tangled together. "How long has the money been accumulating?" I managed to ask. Mr. Banks clicked through another document. 20 years, he said. "Your father never withdrew a single cent. Every profit deposit went directly into the trust. With interest, the account grew to its current balance. Current balance? $47 million. My father had died 17 years ago. He had gone to his grave wearing boots with split soles. He had fixed other people's plumbing late at night because they couldn't afford emergency fees. He had chosen a life of quiet struggle so that I could someday have freedom. But what kind of freedom was this? My ex-husband hunting me. My sister resenting me. Strangers trying to impersonate me. A bank that treated me like a walking anomaly. A future so bright it made my eyes hurt. Standing in the shadow of a past so dark it swallowed breath. I pressed my palms into my knees, grounding myself. "What happens now?" I asked, voice trembling. Mr. Banks gave me a steady, sympathetic look. "Now," he said, "you need a lawyer, a very good one." My head snapped up. "You think I'm in danger?" "I think," he said slowly, "that your circumstances are about to change drastically. And when they do," he glanced at the files, "people in your life may behave unpredictably. People, he didn't need to name them. Richard, Judith, anyone who ever looked at me and saw something to tick." He slid a business card across the desk. "This attorney specializes in trusts and high-stakes inheritances. I advise you to contact him today." The business card felt heavy. Absurdly so. Heavier than the bank card that had turned my life upside down. I tucked it into my purse as if it might burn through the lining. Mr. Banks stood. "I'll escort you out through a private exit," he said kindly. "I think that would be best." I nodded, numb, but as I followed him down the quiet hallway, passing the guarded doors and frosted windows, one thought kept repeating in my mind. Not disbelief, not fear, not even gratitude, just one raw, aching truth. My father sacrificed everything so I could choose my future, and the first choice I made was marrying a man who tried to steal it. The private exit emptied into an alleyway that smelled faintly of roasted coffee from a cafe around the corner. The city buzzed beyond the brick walls. Cars honking, people laughing, footsteps quick with purpose. All of it sounded sharper than usual, like someone had turned the volume up on the world while muting everything inside me. My legs felt weightless but shaky, as if my body hadn't caught up to the new reality. $47 million. It echoed in my mind like a wrong note on a piano. Too loud, too impossible, too jarring. I'd walked into the bank hoping for enough money to buy groceries. Maybe a few days of safety. Instead, I'd walked out with a secret that could destroy or save my entire life. I didn't notice I was clutching the business card Mr. Banks gave me until my fingers started to go numb around its edges. James Patterson, Trust and Estate Law. High Asset Protection. The name sounded expensive. The kind of lawyer whose pen alone probably cost more than the motel room I'd been sleeping in, but I didn't have a choice. Not anymore. The coffee shop across the street had big windows fogged with steam, and people inside who looked like they were holding the world together with caffeine and ambition. I stepped in, ordered the cheapest black coffee on the menu, and sat in a corner booth where nobody would look at me twice. I held the phone for a full minute before I had the courage to dial the number on the card. A calm voice answered. "Patterson Law Group. How may we assist you?" My throat tightened. I was referred by Harold Banks from Westfield National Bank. He said I should speak to Mr. Patterson. "One moment, I'll transfer you." Each second felt like a lifetime. Then a voice came through, smooth, measured, and alert. "This is James Patterson. How can I help you?" I swallowed. My life just changed, and I don't understand how. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Thoughtful, not impatient. "Ms. Morton," he said, as if he'd instantly recognized the weight behind my words. "I can fit you in this afternoon. Come to my office at 3 p.m. I didn't realize until I hung up that my hands were shaking again. His office tower rose into the sky like a glass monolith, the kind of building where people didn't just work, they ruled. Inside, the lobby was a cathedral of marble, high ceilings, and security guards wearing suits tailored better than anything I'd ever owned. For a second, I almost walked out. A voice inside me whispered, "You don't belong here. This isn't your world. Turn around before someone notices the flaw in you." But then I thought of my father, George Hartley, the man with patched boots and tired eyes, making deals with developers and safeguarding a trust worth more than entire neighborhoods. If he could walk into meetings with businessmen who underestimated him, then I could walk into an office that intimidated me. I straightened my shoulders and stepped toward the elevator. The 27th floor was quieter than the lobby, less bustling, more deliberate. Frosted glass walls, modern art on display, plush chairs arranged like a magazine spread. A receptionist greeted me by name, my name spoken with respect for the first time in months. "Mr. Patterson is expecting you." His office was a minimalist masterpiece. Sleek desk, city view, warm lighting. Behind it sat a man in his early 40s, sharp-eyed and impeccably dressed, the kind of person who noticed everything and revealed nothing. He stood as I entered. "Ms. Morton, please sit." I did, feeling both exposed and strangely protected. "Mr. Banks informed me of the basic situation," he began, "but I'd like to hear it in your own words." So I told him everything. The divorce, the motel, the envelope, the card, the impersonation attempt, Richard's sudden cruelty, the timing of everything unraveling. I didn't sugarcoat. I didn't embellish. I simply told the truth, the way someone drowning says I'm underwater. When I finished, Mr. Patterson leaned back, tapping a pen thoughtfully against legal paper. "Ms. Morton," he said finally, "what I am about to explain may be difficult to hear, but it is critical you understand it." I nodded, though my chest tightened. "Your ex-husband," he continued, "almost certainly suspected the existence of this account. He may not have known the amount or the exact structure, but he had enough information to believe you were connected to substantial wealth." My spine stiffened. "I didn't even know," I whispered. "People often don't," he replied, "but people researching them might notice patterns. Property sales, old inheritance filings, unusual trust registrations. Your husband hired a private investigator at exactly the time this account was flagged." I inhaled sharply. "He thought he could reach it," Mr. Patterson went on, "and when he discovered he couldn't, not without your cooperation, he filed for divorce and positioned himself to take everything in your shared marital estate." "He made me desperate," I murmured, realization dripping like poison. "Yes," Mr. Patterson agreed, "because desperation can make a person pliable. He may have intended to get you to voluntarily share the inheritance once you found it." My stomach churned. "He wanted me broken. He wanted you dependent," the lawyer corrected, "so that when you came into wealth, you'd feel indebted to him." A tear slid down my cheek before I could stop it. "He walked me out with one suitcase." Mr. Patterson's expression didn't soften, but his voice did. "And now he has no legal claim to a single cent. That should have felt victorious. It didn't. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff while the world below shifted into something unrecognizable." He leaned forward. "But Ms. Morton, the danger is not over." I froze. "What do you mean?" "People act irrationally when this much money is involved. Your ex-husband may attempt lawsuits, public slander, emotional manipulation, even sabotage. Additionally, news of large inheritances spreads quickly, even if unintentionally. You may receive attention you're not prepared for." He slid a document across the desk. "I recommend these steps immediately. Relocate to a secure hotel under a different name. Establish new bank accounts with high security protections. Allow my team to handle all communications with your ex-husband and your sister. Do not tell anyone else about the inheritance." I stared at the list. A week ago, I wouldn't have been able to afford a taxi. Now, someone was telling me I needed private security measures. "I don't even have a home," I whispered. Mr. Patterson gave a single nod. "Then let's build you a safe place to land, and from there, we rebuild." Something inside me cracked, not in pain but in relief. For the first time since Richard slammed the door on me, someone was on my side. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, but out of strategy, out of belief. "Ms. Morton," he said quietly, "your life was stolen piece by piece, but now you have the means to reclaim it, and more." My father's face flashed in my mind, his kindness, his sacrifices, his quiet strength. "Okay," I said softly, "tell me what to do." And that was the moment everything shifted. Not because of the money, but because I had chosen, finally, to fight. The hotel Mr. Patterson arranged for me looked nothing like the life I had known just a week earlier. The lobby was a sweep of gold and glass, warm lighting reflecting off polished marble floors. A pianist played something soft near the fireplace, the notes so delicate they felt like a balm over my still raw nerves. I followed the concierge to the desk, keeping my head low. "Reservation for Ms. Alder," I said, the alias Mr. Patterson chose for me. The clerk smiled politely, typed something, and handed me a sleek black key card. Room 2103, enjoy your stay. Enjoy. I wasn't sure I remembered how to enjoy anything. The elevator whisked me upward with silent precision. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway lined with plush carpet, the kind that muffled footsteps and made you feel like you were walking on wealth itself. My room was spacious, too spacious, decorated in soft creams and golds, with a balcony overlooking the city. The bed looked untouched, crisp, perfect. I stood just inside the doorway, unable to move. When you've lost everything, safety feels suspicious. I set my suitcase down slowly, as if afraid the floor might collapse. Only then did the weight of the day fully hit me. The bank, the truth, the inheritance, Richard's deception, the lawyer, the new identity, the security warnings, my father's unbelievable sacrifice. My knees buckled before I could stop them. I sank onto the floor, pressing my back against the wall, as tears spilled faster than I could wipe them away. They weren't graceful tears. They were jagged, wrenching sobs pulled from somewhere deep and bruised inside me. I cried for the woman I used to be. I cried for the woman I might become. I cried for my father's patched work boots, for the dinners of cheap pasta, for the quiet dreams he'd hidden beneath the simplest life. I cried for the years I wasted believing love meant sacrificing myself. And beneath all that grief, something else stirred. A spark. Small, defiant, alive. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through sheer curtains. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The sheets felt too soft, the air too clean, the silence too peaceful. Then reality flooded back, cool and heavy. $47 million. That wasn't a number, it was a tectonic shift, a force that changed the gravitational pull of everything in my universe. My phone buzzed, a text from an unrecognized number. We need to talk. I blocked it instantly. 5 minutes later, another number, blocked. Then another. Richard was circling like a shark, sensing blood from miles away. I tried to ignore it, but each buzz jolted through me like static. Finally, I shut the phone off and set it face down on the table. When the knock came at my door, my heart stuttered painfully. I froze. Then a voice called out, "Ms. Alder, it's hotel security. May we speak with you?" I cracked the door open an inch. 2 suited men stood in the hallway. One held a clipboard, the other had an earpiece. "Ma'am," the clipboard man said politely, "we've been instructed by your attorney to confirm that no unauthorized visitors attempt to approach your room. Yesterday evening, someone came asking for you by your legal name." My stomach dropped. "A man?" "Yes." "Dark hair, expensive suit?" They exchanged a glance. "Yes." Richard had found the hotel. "How?" I whispered. "He said he was your husband," the guard explained. "He became aggressive when told no such guest was registered under your legal name. He demanded access. We escorted him off the property." My pulse hammered so loudly I felt it in my fingertips. I'm sorry," I said, though I didn't know why I was apologizing. "There's no need to apologize," the guard replied, "but you may want to remain cautious. Inform the front desk if you need anything." As soon as they left, I shut the door, locked it, then slid the metal security bar in place. I stood there for a long time, forehead resting against the door, breathing in slow, shaky drafts. He hadn't come out of remorse. He hadn't come to apologize. He hadn't come to make peace. He'd come because he heard a whisper, just a whisper of money. My father's money, my inheritance, my future. And he wanted it. But wanting and having were two very different things. At 11 a.m., I sat in Mr. Patterson's office again, staring at the stack of documents he'd compiled overnight. "Your ex-husband has already retained new counsel," he informed me. "They filed a preliminary inquiry with the court this morning." My breath caught. "What kind of inquiry?" "He is attempting to reopen the divorce settlement." "He can't," I said, panic slicing through my voice. "You said—" "He has no legal basis," the lawyer reassured, "but that doesn't prevent him from attempting it. He is claiming fraudulent non-disclosure." I blinked, But I didn't know about the trust. And we will prove that, Mr. Patterson said confidently. But prepare yourself. This may get louder before it goes quiet. Louder? The last thing I wanted was attention. As if hearing my thoughts, he added, "Our goal is to keep your identity and assets protected. Your father set up this trust with rare foresight. You have legal shields in place many people never get." I exhaled shakily. "I don't want to fight him." He folded his hands calmly. "Then don't fight him. Let me do it." His certainty steadied something inside me. "Now," he continued, "we need to discuss your immediate plans. Where do you want to be? What do you want to do next?" What did I want? Nobody had asked me that in years. Richard had always made my choices for me. What car to drive? What clothes to buy? What friends to distance myself from? What dreams to give up? Now, suddenly I had all the choices in the world, but I didn't even know how to start imagining them. "I don't know," I admitted quietly. "I feel like I'm rebuilding myself from nothing." He nodded. "Then start with safety. Then stability. Then purpose." Purpose. The word landed somewhere deep inside me, like it had been waiting there all along. "What if," I began hesitantly, "what if I don't want this money to just sit? What if I want to do something with it? Such as?" I didn't answer yet, but an idea, a spark, had begun forming. Something my father would have understood. That afternoon, as I walked out of the office building with the city buzzing beneath me, I realized something surprising. For the first time since the divorce, maybe for the first time in years, fear wasn't the only thing inside me. There was something else now. Something quieter but stronger. Possibility. My father had built a future he never lived to see, and now it was my turn to build something of my own. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the hotel curtains like soft gold ribbons. It made the room glow in a way that didn't match the heaviness in my chest. I lay still for several minutes, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember who I was supposed to be now. A divorced woman? A millionaire's daughter? A target? A survivor? All of them felt true. None of them felt complete. I finally forced myself up and made coffee with a small machine near the minibar. The bitter smell grounded me, reminding me that despite everything swirling around me, life still moved in simple, familiar rhythms. But as soon as I turned my phone back on, the storm resumed. Calls, texts, voicemails, unknown numbers, blocked numbers, numbers I hadn't seen in years. I deleted all of them without listening, except one. The voicemail from Judith. My sister's voice spilled through the speaker. Tight, high, angry, in that specific way only family could manage. "Clara, I can't believe you didn't tell me. Dad's money belongs to both of us. Don't you dare pretend you're entitled to everything. Call me back. We need to discuss what's fair." What's fair? She hadn't spoken to me in 8 years. Years during which I had lost myself in a marriage that drained me dry. Years where she never once picked up a phone to ask if I was okay. Years where every birthday and holiday passed in cold silence. And now she wanted fairness. I deleted the voicemail. Let the lawyer handle her. I had other more urgent things to figure out. Around noon I went downstairs to the hotel cafe. It was bright and filled with the smell of fresh pastries and caramel lattes. People chatted at small tables, tapping on laptops or meeting for business discussions. Normal people with normal problems. I sat by the window, letting the warmth from my cup seep into my palms. Everything had happened so fast that my mind felt like a dam threatening to crack. But beneath the chaos, something steady pulsed. A purpose I hadn't let myself voice yet. When Mr. Patterson asked what I wanted to do with the money, I didn't answer because I wasn't ready. But now, in the quiet hum of the cafe, I finally let the truth surface. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want luxury. I didn't even want comfort. I wanted meaning. I wanted to take the pain I had endured, the betrayal, the homelessness, the hopelessness, and use it to ensure no other woman had to sit alone in a motel room with only $43 and a broken heart. I wanted to build something that honored my father's sacrifice. Something that would make him proud. My phone vibrated again. I expected another call or text, but it wasn't that. It was a news alert. My stomach tightened as I tapped it open. Richard Morton's real estate company under investigation for fraud and safety violations. A photo of him and Leslie appeared beneath the headline. They both looked shaken, frantic, trying to shove past reporters swarming the courthouse steps. The article went on to outline years of deceptive practices, cutting corners, falsifying inspection reports, hiding structural dangers from buyers. Another alert buzzed, then another, then another. It had broken publicly. The investigation had exploded overnight. My hands shook as I scrolled, not from guilt, but from an old reflex, a fear that Richard would somehow appear and blame me. People in the cafe murmured as the news spread on their phones. Then my device buzzed again, a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, my thumb swiped to answer. Hello? Silence for half a second. Then, you did this? His voice. Richard's voice. Cold, flat, seething. I stiffened. Your actions did this, Richard, not me. You're pathetic if you think this will stop me. You think you're safe with your little lawyer and your fancy hotel. Newsflash. You owe me. I built a life for you. I made you who you are. No, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my tone. You tore my life apart because you wanted money that never belonged to you. You ungrateful... I'm hanging up now. You listen to me, Clara. This isn't over. I will find a way to get what I deserve. And you'll regret... I hung up. My heart thudded in the too quiet aftermath. A woman at a nearby table glanced at me with concern. I forced a small smile and looked away. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted transformation. I opened my notebook, the first thing I'd bought with the idea of starting fresh, and wrote the name at the top of a blank page. Second Chances Foundation. Below it, I scribbled ideas faster than I could organize them. Emergency housing grants. Legal assistance for women escaping financial or emotional abuse. Job training and education funding. Support for women blindsided by divorce. Mental health resources. Microloans to help women start small businesses. Childcare vouchers. Partnerships with real estate agencies for safe transitional housing. The page filled quickly, the ideas multiplying like seeds bursting open after a long winter. My father had given me freedom, but I wanted to give others dignity. As the hour passed, something inside me settled, not fully healed, not fully whole, but aligned. For the first time, the money didn't feel like a burden or a threat. It felt like a tool, a weapon, a light, a path. When I looked up from the page, the city outside the window looked different. Still busy, still noisy, but no longer overwhelming. It looked navigable, full of potential. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Richard. It was Mr. Patterson. We should meet today. Urgent update about your ex-husband's legal actions. Also, good news. Call when you're ready. I took a slow sip of coffee. My life had split in two, before the bank and after. And I was finally stepping into the after. By the time I arrived at Mr. Patterson's office later that afternoon, the energy in the city felt different, like the air carried a quiet tremor beneath everyday noise. News vans were parked outside the courthouse across the street. People lingered on sidewalks, staring at their phones, whispering in clusters. Richard's scandal wasn't just a headline anymore. It was spreading, becoming a story. A reckoning. My footsteps echoed down the hallway as I approached the glass door of the law firm. I expected to see Mr. Patterson alone, but instead 2 other professionals sat in the conference room. A woman in a charcoal grey suit with keen eyes, and a younger man typing rapidly on a laptop. Mr. Patterson gestured me inside. Ms. Morton, thank you for coming. We have developments. I sat bracing myself. The woman spoke first. I'm Dana Wu, financial crimes consultant. I've joined your case to assess risk factors on both the legal and personal side. The younger man nodded politely. And I'm Noah, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity? It struck me how far I'd come. Days ago, I was counting coins in a motel room. Now, people with specialties I barely understood were teaming up to protect me. What happened? I asked quietly. Mr. Patterson folded his hands. 2 things. One concerning, one beneficial. Start with the concerning. He slid a document toward me. Your ex-husband has filed for an emergency injunction. He's claiming you intentionally hid marital assets. I let out a sharp breath. But I didn't even know about them. We know, he said calmly. And the court will know. But he's desperate and attempting a last-ditch strategy to freeze your accounts. Noah added, he's also attempting to subpoena bank records that do not belong to him. The request will fail, but the attempt itself shows escalating behavior. Escalating. A cold shiver traveled down my spine. Is he dangerous? I asked. Dana considered the question carefully. Desperation and entitlement is a volatile mix. He's not necessarily violent, but he's unpredictable. And financially cornered. That makes him a risk. My stomach tightened. Now, Mr. Patterson said, the good news. He slid another document toward me. This is the court's initial response. They denied his injunction within 30 minutes. His claim had no legal standing. A breath I didn't realize I'd been holding escaped me. So, he can't touch the trust? Not a penny, Mr. Patterson confirmed, but he will likely continue trying, which is why we need to finalize the protective measures we discussed. Dana opened a folder. We've already secured a new identity layer for you. Aliases for correspondence, new mailing routes, and, if necessary, temporary relocation. Relocation? I echoed. Purely optional, she said, but available if pressure increases. Then Mr. Patterson leaned forward slightly. Now, the more strategic question, Ms. Morton. What do you want to do next? Not about Richard, about your life. You mentioned the beginnings of a plan earlier. I hesitated, then pulled my notebook from my bag, the page labeled Second Chances Foundation. I slid it toward him. He examined it for a long moment. You want to build a nonprofit? I want to build safety nets, I said. For women who fall through the cracks the way I did. For women whose marriages implode and leave them with nothing. For women who lose their homes, their savings, their dignity overnight. I want to help them rebuild. Mr. Patterson looked at me with something new in his eyes. Respect. Your father would be proud. The words hit me softly but deeply. I hope so. Dana nodded approvingly. This is a strong direction, and frankly, it will also strengthen public perception in case the divorce dispute becomes visible. It shows you're not acting out of spite. I'm not, I said firmly. This isn't about revenge. But even as I said it, something uneasy stirred in my chest. Because revenge, the soft, seductive whisper of it, had brushed against me more than once. Seeing Richard's name in the news, seeing Leslie's smug smile crack, seeing the company built on lies begin to collapse. It wasn't justice I felt then. It was release. A quiet, dangerous satisfaction. No, not satisfaction. Closure. And yet even closure felt too small, too personal. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. There's another matter, and I need you to stay calm as I explain. My pulse quickened. What is it? He clicked a remote, and a news clip appeared on the monitor behind him. A reporter stood outside the courthouse, and sources say Morton attempted to access undisclosed financial information connected to his former spouse shortly before their divorce. I froze. My blood went cold. Mr. Patterson muted the clip. As of this morning, the media is speculating about hidden assets, he said. Not specifically your inheritance yet, but if the investigation deepens, someone may connect the dots. Panic surged up my throat. How do we stop them? You don't need to, he said gently. Your trust is private and legally protected, but the attention may still bring unwanted contact from acquaintances, estranged family. He paused. Your sister, for example. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with another voicemail notification. I didn't have to listen to know she wanted something. Everyone wanted something now, except my father. All he'd ever wanted was to give. He lived frugally so I could live freely. He sacrificed comfort so I could one day have choices. And I had wasted so many years giving my choices to someone who never deserved them. No more. I straightened in my seat. What are my next steps? I asked. Mr. Patterson smiled vehemently, his version of approval. We formalize your foundation. We structure your finances. We secure your well-being. And then, he slid a pen toward me, you start building a life on your terms. Hours later, I stood on the rooftop garden of the hotel, the city stretching out in glittering grids below. Cars flowed like veins, lights flickered from high-rises, and the wind carried the distant hum of thousands of lives unfolding at once. For the first time in months, I felt something I didn't recognize at first. Hope, not the fragile kind that cracked under pressure, but a grounded, steady kind, like roots pushing into soil. This money, this unexpected fortune, it wasn't just a gift. It was responsibility. It was potential. It was the first brick of a foundation I wanted to build not for myself, but for countless others. I set my hands on the railing, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, Richard was spiraling. Somewhere out there, Judith was resentful. Somewhere out there, people were whispering about scandals and fortunes. But up here, above all of it, I understood something clearly. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't lost. I wasn't alone. I was transforming, reclaiming, rebuilding, rerouting. When I went back inside, I opened my notebook again. Under the foundation name I wrote, "Help women find strength before they reach the breaking point." And then beneath it, "Honor Dad through every choice." I underlined it twice. Tomorrow everything would begin. 3 days passed in a blur of meetings, paperwork, and strategy sessions. I learned more about trusts, asset protection, and corporate accountability in 72 hours than I had in my entire life. By the 4th morning, my head was packed with legal terminology, financial forecasts, nonprofit regulations, and cybersecurity protocols. It was exhausting, but in a strangely empowering way. For the first time, I wasn't being talked over. I wasn't being dismissed. I wasn't being controlled. Every conversation centered on a single truth. I had power now, and I needed to choose how to use it. By midweek, the Second Chances Foundation existed on paper. Mr. Patterson's team was handling registration, tax documentation, staffing plans, partnership outreach. The structure was already taking shape. Advisors, legal consultants, financial analysts. And then came the meeting that changed everything. "Clara," Donna said as she entered the conference room, "we need to go over something urgent regarding Richard." A cold jolt shot through me. What now? She slid a packet of documents in front of me, printouts of messages, social media posts, and leaked screenshots. "He's talking," she said flatly. My stomach twisted. To who? Everyone who will listen. I scanned the pages. Richard had been posting online, joining forums, giving interviews, leaking pieces of our divorce, half-truths, manipulations, outright lies. He painted himself as the victim, the abandoned husband, the wronged man, the man left for dead by a gold-digging wife who hid millions. Millions! He didn't know the amount, but he knew enough to be dangerous. My throat tightened. "He's trying to ruin me." "He's trying to pressure you," Dina corrected, "to push you into negotiating." "I won't," I said, anger rising from some deep, long-buried place. "No," she agreed, "you won't. But you need to be ready for the next phase." "What phase is that?" "The smear campaign." The words hit me like a physical blow. I didn't do anything wrong. "That won't matter," Noah said gently. "People don't need truth. They just need a juicy story." My hands shook slightly under the table. I hated that he was right. Richard had taken so much from me already. My home, my stability, my dignity. I would not let him take my reputation. "I want to go public," I blurted. The room froze. Mr. Patterson raised an eyebrow. "Public? How?" "Not to announce the money," I clarified. "To tell the truth. My truth. Women need to know what financial abuse looks like, what manipulation feels like, what it means to be erased and expected to smile through it." They exchanged glances, a silent conversation in lawyer language that lasted a full 10 seconds. Finally, Mr. Patterson spoke. "You could," he said slowly, "but it's a double-edged sword. You would control the narrative, But once your story is out, you lose privacy. I already lost privacy, I murmured, because Richard took it. Donna leaned forward. If you do this, you have to be strategic, careful, documented. You're not just one woman telling her story. You'd be the face of a movement. I blinked. A movement? You'd be shocked, she said. How many women have lived a version of your life? And how many are looking for someone to say, "It happened to me too, and I survived"? The words stilled me. It wasn't ego, it wasn't vanity, it was purpose. The thing I had been searching for. Okay, I whispered, tell me how to do it right. Before we moved forward, Mr. Patterson insisted I take a break. A single afternoon, he said. Go outside, get fresh air, clear your mind. I hadn't been outside alone since the hotel incident. Fear had a way of shrinking your world until it fit inside your own ribcage. But I needed this, so I walked. The city was brisk and noisy, bustling in a way that had once overwhelmed me. But now I found myself walking through it with a strange sense of calm. People didn't know who I was. They didn't know the fortune I carried or the past I escaped. They didn't know the foundation forming in my mind, ready to bloom. For the first time in a long time, I felt invisible in a good way. Free. I wandered into a bookstore cafe tucked between two tall office buildings. Inside, shelves leaned with paperbacks, and an older woman at the counter smiled as she poured tea. When she spoke, her accent reminded me faintly of my father's coworker from years ago, warm, weary, kind. What would you like, dear? Chamomile, please. As she prepared it, I drifted toward a bulletin board on the wall. It was filled with handwritten notes. Support group for divorced women, Mondays at 7. Need help with rent? Local fund provides short-term aid. Looking for job training? Free programs available. My chest tightened. These were women like me. Women who had been abandoned, betrayed, underestimated. Women whose lives had been uprooted because one person decided they had more value as a victim than a partner. And suddenly I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt called. When the woman brought over my tea, she paused and looked at me with quiet intuition. You look like you've been carrying something heavy, dear. I gave a small nod. I have, but I think I'm learning how to put it down. Her smile was soft and knowing. Good. When we put things down, our hands get free to build something new. Build. Yes, that was exactly what I needed to do. When I returned to the firm, Mr. Patterson met me in the hallway. Perfect timing, he said. I have an update. We stepped into his office, and he lowered his voice. Investigators found evidence that Richard attempted to liquidate shared assets before the divorce paperwork was filed. That's illegal. My breath caught. What does that mean? It means his entire narrative collapses. It also means he's in deeper legal trouble than before. And it gives us leverage. Leverage for what? To end this cleanly, quietly, permanently. I exhaled, tension melting from my chest in a slow wave. Clara, he continued, you don't have to fight him. He's destroying himself. But part of me already knew that. Because people who build their lives on lies eventually drown in them. That night, I stood by the hotel window again, watching the city lights flicker like fireflies, trapped in glass towers. My reflection in the window looked different now. Not defeated, not lost, not small. But awakening, becoming, reclaiming. I touched the window pane, cold under my fingertips, and whispered to the city, to my father, to myself. I survived, and now I rise. The next day, everything would change. For Richard, for my foundation, for the women I hadn't even met yet, for me. The next morning began with a knock on my suite door. Firm, steady, unmistakably professional. I opened it to find Noah standing there, tablet in hand, his expression serious but not urgent. Ms. Morton, he said quietly, we've received new information regarding your ex-husband. You should come to the office. A familiar tightness pulled at my chest. Is something wrong? Not wrong, he said, stepping aside for me to follow. Just definitive. That word echoed in my mind all the way to the firm. When I entered the conference room, the entire team was already there. Mr. Patterson at the head of the table, Dana at his left, and 2 additional associates I hadn't met before. A file sat open in front of him, papers spread like a map of someone's downfall. "Clara," Mr. Patterson said as I sat, "what you're about to hear formally closes the chapter you've been trapped in." He tapped the first document with a single finger. "Richard was arrested this morning." I blinked. "Arrested?" "For multiple counts," Dana clarified. "Fraudulent real estate practices, bribery of inspectors, falsified documents, intentional endangerment of homeowners, and attempted financial impersonation." My breath caught. The room seemed to tilt, not from fear, but from the sudden release of a weight I'd been carrying so long I forgot it was there. "He'll likely face trial," Mr. Patterson continued, "and based on the evidence, he will almost certainly lose his license and serve time." I stared at the paperwork, the damning list of charges, the signatures, the timestamps, Richard's name printed in bold. The man who once told me I had nothing without him now had nothing of his own. No home, no business, no wife, no lies left to stand behind. And for the first time, I didn't feel pity, or triumph, or vindication. I felt release, like someone had unlocked a door inside me. "Your involvement in this matter is minimal," Mr. Patterson added. "We submitted evidence anonymously. There's no legal reason for your identity to become public unless you choose otherwise." I nodded slowly. "Thank you." "There's more," Noah said, swiping through his tablet. "Leslie left the state last night. She's not listed in any of the filings. She cut ties with Richard completely." A hollow, almost distant feeling washed through me. Once I thought she had stolen my husband. Now I knew I had lost nothing. Nothing worth keeping. When the meeting ended, I didn't return to the hotel right away. Instead, I walked. No destination, no rush, just letting the city breathe around me. At a park bench shaded by tall oaks, I finally sat. A group of children played tag nearby, laughing so freely it stirred something warm inside me. Across the path, an elderly couple fed pigeons. A young woman in scrubs talked on the phone, exhaustion etched into her posture, but determination shining through. Life moved, life healed, life continued. I closed my eyes and let the sunlight wash over me. Richard's chapter was over, but mine wasn't. Not even close. Over the next few weeks, everything began to shift. The foundation officially launched with a small staff and a quiet rollout. Nothing flashy, nothing publicized, just a seed planted in the soil of necessity. Within days, applications began coming in. Women fleeing abusive homes, mothers abandoned with children, divorcees with empty bank accounts and eviction notices, women who had spent years being diminished, belittled, erased, women who were me. We funded legal representation. We paid for apartments and groceries and daycare and classes. We negotiated settlements and helped rebuild resumes. We saved lives, and with each woman we helped, I felt a thread inside me knit back together. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was becoming someone my father would recognize. Someone who believed in kindness as strength, in resilience as wealth. 6 months after the bank discovered the inheritance, I moved into a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing extravagant. Nothing ostentatious, just a place with sunlight, hardwood floors, a little balcony where I could drink morning coffee. A home, my home. One afternoon, while unpacking a box of old photo frames, I found a picture of my father, laughing, his sleeves rolled up, grease on his hands from fixing something. I held the frame to my chest and whispered, "I hope I'm honoring you." As I hung the photo on the wall, I felt peace settle over me like a warm blanket. Not everything was perfect. Judith still tried to reach me occasionally, sometimes with spite, sometimes with desperation. Reporters occasionally sniffed around looking for scandal. Richard's trial loomed in the future. But none of it controlled me anymore. I had built something stronger than fear, purpose. The true turning point came unexpectedly. At the community college auditorium, during a scholarship ceremony named in my father's honor, I handed a certificate to a young girl with bright, tear-filled eyes. Her father stood behind her, calloused hands, worn boots, pride etched into every line of his face. She hugged me, whispering, "This means everything. And in her father's eyes, I saw my own father again. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. As the ceremony ended, I stepped outside into the crisp evening air. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, colors that reminded me of another evening long ago, standing on a sidewalk with only one suitcase and $43 to my name. I had no idea then how drastically life would change, how pain would carve me into someone new, how loss would clear space for purpose, how betrayal would become the doorway to freedom, how a father's quiet sacrifice would rewrite the future. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for everything." The wind brushed softly against my cheek, almost like an answer. That night, standing on my balcony, overlooking the twinkling city lights, I understood something profound. The best revenge was never destruction. It was transformation. It was becoming untouchable. Not through wealth, but through purpose. It was living a life so full, so meaningful, that the ghosts of the past couldn't cast shadows anymore. I wasn't the woman Richard tried to break. I wasn't the woman Judith tried to envy. I wasn't the woman who walked into a bank with a faded card and trembling hands. I was Clara Morton, daughter of George Hartley, founder of Second Chances, a woman who rose, not in spite of what happened to her, but because of it. I lifted my chin toward the horizon, letting the cool air fill my lungs. My story wasn't one of survival anymore. It was one of power, of renewal, of freedom. And as the city lights shimmered like stars fallen to earth, I whispered into the night, "I'm ready for whatever comes next."